Welcome to WanaxTV Live. In this episode, we talk about Mycenaeans and Egyptians and their relations in the Late Bronze Age. Before we begin, I'd like to give a couple of shout-outs, a few shout-outs. I'd like to thank to all of the Patreon members, all of the YouTube exclusive members, of course, and all of the channel subscribers. Most recently, as you can see, we have received quite a few YouTube channel members. Much of this is courtesy of Interdictor, so great thanks to him. We have Hal Porter, who is also a Patreon member, by the way. We have Josh Gardner, Sappho, Alicia, and Nata Sene, if I pronounce this correctly. And we have Anne-Marie Norden. And I would also like to add Uncle Ira God, who has joined us on Patreon as well. So thanks to them. Shout out to Nikolaus in the chat. Good to see you as well. And of course, Interdictor is in the chat as well. This episode was kind of scheduled, so I scheduled this one a few hours ago. Unlike the other ones which we just randomly aired with no notice, no anything. In this episode, obviously, very interesting topic. We're talking about Mycenaeans and we're talking about ancient Egypt in late Bronze Age. And when it comes to Egypt, I would highly recommend you to visit History with Sai and his channel. As you can see, he has a whole series dedicated to ancient Egypt. He goes dynasty by dynasty, and I think he has passed. He's either close or already past number 30. Very impressive. And this series has been going on for years, so make sure to check that out. And another channel that's been supporting of WanaxTV since the beginning is Ancient Sites Girl channel, who provides more of a traveler, uh, very nice content. Check out her channel as well. Um, Focused mainly on ancient Egypt and Egyptian mythology, travels as it relates to the ancient Egyptian sites and so on and so on. So make sure to check them out. And with that being said, we will go to the segments. As you can see, we will first go with the overview, the background of Mycenaeans and of the Egyptians as it relates to the Late Bronze Age. We will have the segment of the land of the Tanayu, which was the first mention of the Mycenaean Greece by the Egyptian sources. As you can see, it was during the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III. The mention happened in 1437 during his campaign in the Levant, that he received a delegation from the land of Tanayu. We will also talk about the Mycenaean Egyptian trade in the late Bronze Age, and another great topic would be Minoan Egyptian trade in during the Middle Bronze Age, which is also a great topic for another episode. But in this one, we'll be focused on the Mycenaeans, and then we'll slowly go towards Ekwesh and their mention as a mention of Ekwesh by the Egyptians as a part of the Sea Peoples and their very possible association with the Achaeans or late Bronze Age Greeks, Mycenaeans as we know them. All right, well, without any further ado, we will go to the segment number one, which is overview of ancient Egypt as it relates to this topic. Obviously, Egypt is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, civilization that we know of, together with the Sumerians, of course. great power of the Bronze Age, great power throughout the whole period of early Bronze Age, Middle Bronze Age, as the international relations really took off during the Middle Bronze Age, and of course Late Bronze Age during the era of the New Kingdom. And we have a little background here, as you can see on the screen. Unified Kingdom of Egypt is established in about 3100 BC. And during this period, we have the early dynastic period, we have the Old Kingdom. In these early days, the famed pyramids were built, many of them, the most famous of them, the Great Pyramid of Giza, during the reign of Cheops or Khufu, as Cheops is a Greek name. Um, and that period of prosperity was stopped by the first intermediate period with a lot of turbulence, a lot of internal fighting, which lasted from 2181 until roughly 2055 BC. Then we have reemergence during the period of the Middle Kingdom, and this is where we record extensive trade with the Minoans, an episode that we might do in the future. Well, we will certainly do it in the future, but when likely within a month or even even faster. I think in the next 4 or 5 episodes we should be back to the Minoans, and one of the episodes will be Minoan Egyptian relations during the Bronze Age. Another interruption during the second intermediate period. This is when the Hyksos took over the northern part of Egypt, and the kingdom of Kush exercised influence in Upper Egypt, which is the southern part. And finally, the period of the New Kingdom starts at 1570 BC when Ahmosi I conquers the land away from the Hyksos. He kicks the Hyksos out and establishes the new kingdom of Egypt. And as you can see, in the New Kingdom, we have quite a few pharaohs of significance as it relates to our topic. I'm not saying that nobody else other than these pharaohs was important. It's just that as it relates to the Mycenaeans, to the general area. For example, Hittites, when we can't not mention Ramses II, obviously, but we have Ahmose I, who liberated Egypt from the Hyksos in the late second part of the 16th century BC. We have Thutmose I, who was a great military pharaoh, a great military commander. He defeated Kush. He campaigned throughout the Levant. He was the first Egyptian pharaoh to cross the Euphrates River, and he erected a stele over there, I believe, a monument to commemorate that, a feat that was later matched by his one of his successors, Thutmose III, who was also a military pharaoh, very militaristic. He ruled together with his mother Hatshepsut during the early part of his reign. When she passed away, she ruled by himself. Eventually, during the later part of his reign, he attempted removing Hatshepsut from history altogether, desecrating, removing her monuments, her inscriptions, and so on. But we're not going to talk about that much in this episode. What's relevant is that he also campaigned in Levant, and that happened in the second part of. Well, he had more than a dozen military campaigns, so that was throughout the whole 15th century BC. What's relevant to us is the later part of the century, where when he, during one of the last campaigns that he held in the Levant, that he received what we what is considered to be a Mycenaean delegation. After him, one of the relevant pharaohs, obviously Ramses the second. He reigned for so many years. He was very significant, built so many monuments in his name, and obviously had a war with the Hittites, the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC. Very famous battle, very definitely deserves an episode for itself. And then we have Merneptah, the late Bronze Age slash tail end of the Bronze Age pharaoh, who is relevant to us because he was invaded by the Libyans, the Libu, who were aided by the Sea Peoples, and among them we have Aquesh, is which scholars believe corresponds to the Achaeans. And as you can see here, he ruled at the very end of the 13th century BC. And finally, we have Ramses III, who decisively defeated the Sea Peoples. There were no Aquesh among them at the time, but there were other groups very relevant, such as the Peleset, the Teaker, the Washesh, and so on. So that's a brief summary of Egypt and what's relevant to us and this topic when it comes to Egypt. Obviously, the Egyptian history is much, much, much more than this. And like I said, if you want to go a deep dive into the history of Egypt, go check History with Sai. He does he does a serious dynasty by dynasty. He goes from the pre-dynastic period, the first dynasty. He has a separate video for each and every Egyptian dynasty, so check him out. But moving on, we go to the Mycenaeans, and the Mycenaeans, as we know them today, they didn't call themselves that, besides probably the city of Mycenae itself, which was the most powerful city and the capital of what we consider to be Mycenaean Greece. And they called themselves the Achaeans, and very likely the Danaans and the Argives, as reported by Homer. The Well, we have Sai listening, so shout out to History with Sai once again. He's watching us live, so that's great news. But back to these names of the late Bronze Age Greeks slash Mycenaeans. Homer calls them by three synonymous names, three synonyms, which have the exact same meaning in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it's Achaeans, Danaans, and Argives. The term Argives we can associate with the region of Argolis and the narrower region of Argos in the Argive Plains, the core region of the Mycenaean Greeks in the late Bronze Age. This is where the Mycenaeans originated in the citadels of Tiryns, Mycenae, the city of Argos itself, which was a smaller settlement compared to the former two, the citadel of Medea, Asini, the port of Nauplia, and furthermore Laconia. Those were considered to be the core regions of the Achaeans. And Achaeans was probably an ethnic term, a tribal term, as we know in the historical in the archaic and classical times. The Achaeans still remained one of the chief tribes of the classical Greece, together with the Dorians, Ionians, and Aeolians. So Achaeans was probably some kind of ethnic or tribal name, which the name of the actual people that is associated with the people. Argives would be associated with the region more. And then we have the Danaans, which we are not 100% sure. It could be association with a certain dynasty. It could be just a name that they used for themselves in another context, perhaps based on a founder or a namesake or an eponymous king or so on. But either way, these three terms, Achaeans, Danaans, and Argives, are used by Homer to describe the Mycenaean era Greeks, and it's probably what they used for themselves as well. We do have references to Achaia in the Linear B records. I believe they come from Knossos, and the inscription reads Achaviade, which means from Achaia, as it relates to geographical context, and that probably referred to the Greek mainland in the broader sense, or at least, at the very least, the core Achaean region, which would be Peloponnese and more narrowly Argolis. So we have the name terminology out of the way, and the Mycenaean origins we can trace back to as early as the Tiryns culture, and possibly even a few centuries earlier, during the end of the previous period, we have some changes in the citadel of Tiryns. We have emergence of what appears to be new style of pottery, which is associated with the what would become the Tiryns culture during the later part of the third millennium BC, and these people are believed to be the ancestors of the Mycenaeans themselves. There appears to be continuity between this culture and the later Middle Hellenic period, which just continued on developing cities such as, not cities, more like significant settlements such as Mycenae, Tiryns, and by the, obviously, as you can see on the screen, late Hellenic period spans from 1550 to all the way till the very end of the Mycenaean Greece and entering the Greek Dark Ages, 1050 BC. But the Mycenaean Greece itself, as considered by the scholars to have emerged at about 1750 BC, and this is when the citadel of Mycenae really emerges as the chief citadel in the region. The citadel of Tiryns is all the settlement of Tiryns at that time is also significant, but it appears to be a part of the Mycenaean polity, which is centered around the city of Mycenae, which, or should we say, citadel of Mycenae. That citadel controls the area of Argolis, likely sites in Laconia, such as the Bronze Age, late Bronze Age Sparta, or Menelaon, as it was later known. And eventually, these Achaeans, or Danaans, or as we simply refer to them, the Mycenaeans, eventually came to control much of the continental Greece, all the way from Thessaly to Attica to Peloponnese, and at one point, taking advantage of the weakened Minoan civilization on Crete, they start taking over the Aegean, and at 1450 BC, they take over the island of Crete itself. They end the Minoan civilization, and they establish the Aegean hegemony. They have the complete control over much of the Aegean Sea, especially the southern part. They they take the city of Miletus, which used to be a Minoan trade outpost. Now it becomes the chief Mycenaean stronghold in the coastal Anatolia. Now we have already talked about the subsequent Mycenaean Hittite conflicts that lasted centuries, starting from this point on, lasting until the very end of the Bronze Age. We're not going to talk about that much right now, but we do know that, at least according to the Hittite Empire, the Mycenaeans acquired the status of a great power, where the king of Ahiawa, or as the Hittites called him, or the king of Achaia, the Mycenaean king, was considered an equal by the Hittites in several documents of correspondence between the two kingdoms. And obviously, we have trade and commercial contacts with Egypt by the Mycenaeans, which utilized on the previously existing Minoan trade network and continued to acquire great wealth that way. Whether or not the Egyptian pharaohs considered the Mycenaeans to be a great power, that's a big question. I don't think it doesn't appear that Mycenaean Greece was politically very relevant to the Egyptians, considering the fact that it's so far away from Egypt and not very involved in the the politics of the Near East, let's put it that way, not very involved in Egypt, Levant, or elsewhere politically beyond just trade. So whether or not they viewed, they certainly viewed Mycenaean Greece as perhaps an important commercial partner, or a distant commercial partner, but not a great power in a sense that was important to the Egyptians in any political way, very likely. All right, so with this, we have the backgrounds on the Egyptians and on the Mycenaeans out of the way. And we are moving on to the first mention of the Mycenaeans in the Egyptian sources, and that is the land of the Tanayu or Danaya, depending on, we are not sure about the exact pronunciation of the term. It could be Tanayu, could be Danayu, could be Danaya, could be any of these due to the nature of the Egyptian and in general Near Eastern writing systems. Either way, we have Pharaoh Tutmosis III. We have already mentioned him. He ruled from 1479 to approximately 1425 BC. He concluded, or he he led between 17 and 20 military campaigns during his long and illustrious reign. As we already mentioned, the early part of his reign, he was reigning together with his mother Hatshepsut. When she passed away, he continued ruling alone, and eventually, towards the end of his reign, he started deleting his mother from the inscriptions and so on. So we're not going to go in most of his military campaigns. He did have multiple campaigns to the south against the Kushites in Nubia. He had many campaigns throughout the Levant. He had to deal with the rebellions all the time. He had to deal with the Mitanni sponsoring those rebellions, inciting the anti-Egyptian sentiment throughout the Levant. So he had many, many campaigns over there. And he had campaigns against the Mitanni as well. In one of the campaigns, which is, well, we have the 42nd regnal year, which is 1437 BC. This is not where he crossed the Euphrates River, by the way. He crossed that earlier in one of the earlier campaigns. So he had already crossed the Euphrates. He had a raid on the Mitanni territory, and he erected a monument similar to his predecessor, Tutmosis I. So he is one of the two Egyptian pharaohs to have crossed the Euphrates River in an anti-Mitanni campaign. But later on, during the 42nd regnal year, which is 1437 BC, his campaign against Mitanni was rather restricted to defeating the Mitanni garrisons in the region and pro-Mitanni factions that were installed there. He did not have a huge campaign against the Mitanni territory itself, just to be clear. So he took the Arka plain, he took the Tunip, city of Tunip, and he defeated the Mitanni forces near the city of Kadesh. He did not take the city of Kadesh itself. And the occupation of Tunip did not last for too long. I believe just a couple of decades later, the Egyptians were out of there. They were forced to leave. But after he concluded these anti-Mitanni campaigns, he was met with tributes and emissaries of the surrounding polities. I believe that during one of his campaigns, I'm not sure if it was the this exact 42nd regnal year campaign, but he also received tribute from the Hittites, if I'm correct. He certainly received tribute from the surrounding cities and kingdoms in the Levant. Don't quote me on the Hittites, though. And what's important to us is that he received messengers from the king of the land of the Tanayu. And this is the first time in the Egyptian sources that the land of the Tanayu is mentioned. The messengers arrived, they met with the pharaoh, they gave him greeting gifts from the king of the Tanayu, aiming to establish diplomatic relations with Egypt. And what Thutmose received from the Tanayu messengers, ambassadors, were Cretan-style silver jug and 3 copper cups with iron handles. So that's what's reported by Thutmose III himself. Now, Thutmose does not provide geographical context. He doesn't provide location of the Tanayu. He just mentions messengers of the Tanayu king. And as we will soon learn in the following inscription, the land of the Tanayu is the land of the Mycenaean Greece, and it refers to the Greek mainland. So, moving on, we have the reign of Amhotep III, who reigned approximately from 1382 BC to 1344 BC. And he was one of the great builders of his time. During the reign of Amhotep III, Egypt was very wealthy, perhaps the wealthiest it's ever been. And Amhotep III built a mortuary temple, and mortuary temple is very important because there's an inscription on it which mentions the land of the Tanayu. It mentions the geographical context, the locations that we need, and he lists Tanayu as a land beyond the land of Keftiu, and Keftiu is Crete. And I do not have the example right now, but I believe that the way they arranged these locations is the first they were mentioning lands that were closer to Egypt in a certain direction, and then going further and further away, and then in the direction of Keftiu, into the direction of the Aegean Sea, he mentions Keftiu, and beyond Keftiu, he mentions Tanayu, which aligns with the Mycenaean Greece. And not only that, he mentions certain locations within the land of the Tanayu, and he mentions the city of Mycenae, he mentions the port of Nauplia, he mentions the island of Kythera, he mentions Messenia, and he mentions Thebes. Whether he mentioned the city of Thebes or the region of Thebes is unclear, but it is very clear that the land of the Tanayu is the land of the Mycenaean Greece, the Mycenaean Greek mainland, not including Crete. Crete is listed as Keftiu in the Egyptian records. All right. So, if anybody has any questions, we are now half an hour in, and my estimation is that this will be maybe an hour long stream, maybe a little bit longer. Right now it's 10:15 p.m. right here on the East Coast, which means that it's pretty late in Europe and Greece. So whoever is from there, thank you very much for being here. While I am here, I'd like to call everybody who uses Discord to join us on Discord. It's very easy to reach me over there, and it's very easy to engage with our community. We're building a community over there on Discord, and whoever uses it, feel free to join us. The link is in the video description. Also, if you're looking to for an extra content, for some additional content, materials that we sometimes upload, join us on Patreon, and you can join us as a free Patreon member. You will still receive those extra content, extra perks, whatever you may call them. For example, once again mentioning History with Sire, a great friend of the channel, recently when he was in LA in Getty Villa Museum, there was an exhibition, a featured exhibition of a Bronze Age Pylos, from Bronze Age Pylos, I believe it was called. I forgot the exact name of the exhibition, but you can Google it up. Just type featured exhibition Pylos at the Getty Villa. So Sai provided us with some pictures of the exhibits, some videos, and very interesting stuff that we put on Patreon. And you don't have to pay anything. You can just go to patreon.com/WanaxTV and join us as a free member. You'll still be able to see everything that we displayed. All right, moving on, we have trade. So probably the most important part of the Mycenaean Egyptian relations in the late Bronze Age was the commercial part, trade. As we have already mentioned, Egyptian records list Tanayu as the land of the Mycenaeans, either Tanayu or Danayu or Danea. Could be any of those. We're not sure of the exact pronunciation, but it is likely associated with the term Danaans, which is used to, by Homer at least, to describe the Mycenaean Greeks, Danaans or Achaeans or Argives. So we have, oh, also by the way, we have a possible Linear B inscription mentioning Egypt. So this is a possibility. I don't think this is proven yet, but there is an inscription saying Akupitio, which could be a Mycenaean reference to Egyptus, or Egypt as we know it. Rodrigo Mateo says Kithera seems a bit out of place in that list. I agree. I think that the reason Kithera would be on the list is that the Egyptian embassy or Egyptian merchants made a stop at Kithera as they are going from Crete to Greece, as they sail from Crete to Peloponnese. We're talking about late Bronze Age, so those long sea voyages, they are logistically very challenging. So it's very possible that Kithera would be a usual stop between Crete and Greece. They would stop in Kithera and then proceed to Argolis. So it makes sense. And also the reference to Nauplia, which is a port, not a huge Mycenaean palatial center, just a port, same as Kithera, I would say that it looks to me at least that going to Mycenae, the Egyptians sailing over there with ships would make a stop at Kythera and then go to Nauplia and then go from Nauplia to Mycenae to be received by the Mycenaeans. So it kind of does make sense if you ask me, but hopefully it clarifies at least a little bit on why Kythera would be on the list. Did the Egyptians ever mention the Amazons from Libya? I am not sure because I am not an expert on the Egyptian records. I have done my research when it comes to the Egyptian records on the Mycenaeans, so I am prepared for this episode, but I am no expert on the Egyptian records in general. Scale of armor from breastplate found at Salamis with Ramses II inscribed on scale. Vin Russo. Shout out to Vin Russo. I'm not sure if I saw you on the last stream, but welcome back. Either way, going back to the Mycenaean Egyptian trade, we have Mycenaean pottery, which is prominently found among the archaeological artifacts in Egypt dating to the time period that we're talking about. We have stirrup jars, craters, and other artifacts and vessels and pottery items in significant amounts found in sites such as Amarna, Saqqara, and others in Egypt, I believe near Memphis as well. And chemical research, chemical analysis determined that the vast majority of the pottery was produced in Mycenae, Tiryns, and Crete. Shout out to Josh Gardner. Welcome to the episode. Welcome to the stream. It says Europe must have loved the Eastern spices. Well, I believe that's the case today as well. It goes long way. It goes long way into ancient history. And when it comes to the Egyptian artifacts in Mycenaean Greece, also very significant material that we're talking about. We have scarabs, amulets, other objects found at sites such as Mycenae, Knossos, Pylos. Obviously, these are the three of the largest palatial centers in Mycenaean Greece. Mycenae being the biggest, the capital of the confederation or the league or a kingdom, whatever way, we are not sure the Mycenaean Greece was politically organized, but it was the most prominent, the most important, and the chief palatial center of the Mycenaean Greece. That's why it's called Mycenaean Greece, because of Mycenae. Peter is spoiling a future video. No, I'm kidding. So Mycenaean pottery was also found in Etruscan towns, right? Maybe I'm spoiling the future video. That's right, but you're not spoiling the future video. We will be focused less on the Bronze Age proto-history of the Etruscans and their relations of that area to the Mycenaean Greece. We will be very focused on the complete history of the Etruscans, going back to the Apennine culture, going back to the Proto-Villanovan culture, the Villanovan culture, and the subsequent peak of the Etruscan influence in Italy and beyond, their their encounters with Greeks, their cultural exchange and cultural adoptions of many of the Greek features, religion, language, their own origins, their own mythology, their own struggles and battles against the Greeks, there and then obviously with the other peoples of Italy, with Celtic peoples, and most importantly with the Roman Republic, their fights with the Romans, their downfall, decline, and their submergence into the Roman culture and the important contributions of the Etruscans to the what what continued to be Roman culture or a Greco-Roman culture. Yes, so you are not spoiling the video. You are free to post any comments on the Etruscans. So when it comes to the Egyptian artifacts, we have mentioned scarabs, amulets, and other artifacts. And obviously, the most important, the most significant are the cartouches of Amhotep III and Queen Tai. I believe that's how it's pronounced, found at the Mycenaean tomb. And a cartouche, for those who do not know, is a royal inscription of a pharaoh bearing a pharaoh's name and the royal sign in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's a cartouche, a little like a little seal, not a seal, but similar to a seal, a tiny inscription of what appear to be two or three hieroglyphs denoting the pharaoh's name, his royal name. That's his personal royal inscription bearing his name. So besides the cartouche, let's see. Stoic says, I think it was Griffin Warrior exhibit you were talking about in LA. That was some very cool stuff. Griffin Warrior, it might have been there. I do know that there was a Bard fresco, if I'm correct. There were there were exhibits featuring the boar tusk helmets and some other stuff. I would have to revisit. I put maybe a dozen pictures or so sent to me by History with Sai, and also a video of a reconstructed so-called Palace of Nestor, the Megaron of Pylos in the center of its palace. So I have uploaded those things. You can see them on WanaxTV Patreon as a free member. You can just join as a free member. You don't have to pay anything. Also, going back to the Egyptian artifacts found in Mycenaean Greece, we have alabaster and stone vessels found in the Mycenaean palaces and tombs. And obviously, we have raw materials such as gold, ivory, and other materials appearing in Mycenaean Greece, in Mycenaean jewelry and inlays. Mycenaeans did import raw materials from Egypt and they produced luxury goods from it. And they exported those luxury goods back to Egypt and all across Eastern Mediterranean. So as you can see, trade was perhaps the most important point of relations between the new Kingdom of Egypt and the Mycenaean Greece, and such practice would continue in the following centuries until the very end of the Bronze Age, until the second part of the 13th century BC, where any mentions of Tanayu or Danea would be substituted, perhaps substituted with another term, which is associated with the Mycenaean Greeks in the Egyptian records, and that is Ekwesh. And if whoever was here for the last episode the other day, Estate Care asked how valuable was olive oil. Olive oil was very valuable. It was produced in Greece even in the Bronze Age period, and it was exported. It was a very important export goods for the Mycenaeans. It was exported to Egypt also, but it was exported all over Italy, I believe, Levant, Cyprus, Anatolia. Mycenaean Greeks, just like classical Greeks, just like today's Greeks, very big on olive oil. And now we go to the Ekwesh. Our previous episode was about the Sea Peoples, the identity of the Sea Peoples. We have talked about that extensively. And long story short, one of these Sea People groups were the Ekwesh, as they were recorded by the Egyptian sources. And Ekwesh are chiefly associated with the Achaeans, which means Mycenaean Greeks. They are recorded during the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned approximately from 1213 to 1203 BC, during his fifth regnal year, which would be about 1208 BC. He encountered an invasion, an attack from the Libu, the Libyans, led by their chief Marie, I believe his name is, and he was aided by several groups considered to be sea peoples, which are the Ekwesh chiefly, but also the Luka, Shekelesh, Sherden, and Teresh. According to the Egyptian sources, this army numbered 40,000 soldiers, which was huge for the late Bronze Age. Whether or not this is a slight exaggeration on the part of the Egyptians, we do not know, but we do know that they liked to exaggerate, sometimes use propaganda a little bit. We know that chiefly from Ramses II, but other pharaohs were not exceptions when it comes to that. They like to take credit for a lot of things, and whether or not we are dealing with 40,000 soldiers or not, we are not sure, but it was a significant army for sure. Several tens of thousands of soldiers for sure, and chief allies of the Libu were the Ekwesh, at least judging by the amount of soldiers that they brought, they soldiers that were killed in action. Stoic says, "Oh yes, thank you. The boar tusk helmet, I think was there as well. Yes, there was I think a head of a Mycenaean soldier with a prototype of a boar tusk helmet attached. Very good exhibition. I wasn't there myself. I was there, I believe, last year that I visited Getty Villa in LA, and there wasn't any featured exhibition at the time, but I took my time to go and check out a few sections that were important to me. I checked the Cyclades, I believe, not counting the all the Greek stuff that they have over there and the Roman stuff, but they also have a room with the Etruscan section in it. So if you're close to that location, if you're anywhere close to LA, check it out. Etruscans are going to be the biggest documentary that we do this year for sure. That's the biggest piece of content that we're gonna do. It's going to be a 2 hour documentary. I'm working on it right now, so it will be huge. Back to the Ekwesh, they were obviously one of the chief constituents of the Sea Peoples who attacked Egypt during the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah. And at the Battle of Periri, which is the western part of the Nile Delta, where the Libyans attempted to invade, Egyptians were victorious. And according to the Egyptian claims, there were 6,000 killed and 9,000 captured from the enemy, which means that that's 15,000 soldiers. That means that the remaining 25 managed to withdraw. we do know that many of them managed to withdraw. According to the inscription, I believe once the sea peoples saw how powerful the Egyptian armies, they simply withdrew and ran away for their lives. That's what the that's what Merneptah says. But he certainly was victorious because we have the accounts of the prisoners and accounts of the dead, of the killed, and we have a slight controversy because according to the inscription, the Great Karnak inscription, where Merneptah is talking about all of this, he mentions that the foreign armies were the soldiers of the foreign armies were circumcised, which was not known to be a practice among the Greeks, not in the classical period, not in the Mycenaean period. So there's a slight controversy there whether or not the Ekwesh could really be associated with the Greeks, whether they could really be associated with the Achaeans or not. Any other context points in that direction. Now we do have information that 2,201 Akwesh soldier was killed, 722 of Teresh, 200 of Shekelesh, and none of the Luca are listed among the dead. And we do know that the uncircumcised soldiers, which are the Libyans, were counted um, by their private parts, and those who were circumcised were counted by their hands. The Egyptians cut their hands off, and they, I believe, loaded them on carts, either donkeys or some other carts. They loaded them to count, and that's how they counted the dead. So yeah, that's what the Egyptians did. Cookie Thief says, "What a night! Come back from going out to a live Wanax stream. Well, welcome to the stream. We are almost 1 hour in, and we are in the later part of the stream. We are not really towards the end. We'll take some time towards the end to engage with the chat to answer questions from the chat. I think it's a nice practice that we should adopt moving forward. So you are right on time. Vin Russo. I think the circumstances were Sheridan and Akwesh mercenaries that had lived in Egypt for years and might have been forced to. Well, it could be. I mean, I have read the inscription itself, and it just says that the foreign armies, or I'm paraphrasing, it just says the foreign armies were answered. It doesn't, it does, were circumcised. It doesn't specifically say Ekwesh were circumcised. It does not say that, but from the context, it appears that all of the foreign armies were counted by hand. So, and it does appear, and it does clearly say that the Egyptians counted all the circumcised fallen soldiers by the hand. So it I don't think it doesn't say, hey, we counted the Akwesh by the hand. It does not say that, but it just like it's vaguely implied, and it's considered to be so by the scholars. So that's what we're going with. But yeah, that's the controversy when it comes to the Akwesh. Jim Ewing says David Rohl covers some of the Greek history when it when it coincides with Egyptian history in his book Lords of Avaris. Josh Gardner, I am not sure about that. And Jim says, was each soldier rewarded in some way based on on the number of hands they claimed from the defeated foes? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that after the battle was over, they went over all the dead and they really cut their hands and but it doesn't say if they cut one hand per soldier or both hands per soldier because maybe they could cut both hands from some fallen soldiers and inflate the number of the killed enemies. Now when I think about it, certainly couldn't do that with the fallen Libyans. They yeah, they could not inflate those numbers for sure. But based on these numbers, you can see that the Ekwesh appear to be the strongest force among the sea peoples. So Shekelesh only 200 fallen soldiers, Teresh 700, and Ekwesh more than 2,000. There's no accounts on Luca, which is strange because Luca on the Great Karnak inscription, Luca is clearly said to have participated. It says Ekwesh, Luca, Shekelesh, Sherden, and Teresh. And I believe another inscription where they actually count the dead, they make no mention of Luca. So that's it when it comes to Ekwesh. Obviously, the invasions of the Sea Peoples, the campaigns of the Sea Peoples would continue in the following decades, but Ekwesh were not a part of these campaigns anymore. The next campaign happens during the reign of Ramses III, and by this time we have no Akwash present. We have Peleset being the chief group, together with the Washesh, the Teyeker, the Denyen, and others. And this coalition was eventually defeated by Ramses III at 1175 BC, roughly 1175, at the Battle of the Nile Delta, the naval battle of the Nile Delta, also a simultaneous land battle close to the Nile Delta. I forgot which exact location was that, but double victory for the Egyptians, decisive defeat for the invading Sea Peoples, and subsequent settlement of some of the Sea People groups in the Levant. We know that Teyaker settled at the city of Dor, where they remained for the following several centuries. We know that the Peleset settled in coastal southern Canaan, cities such as Ascalon or Ashkelon, Gaza, Gath, and two other cities. Ekron and one other city. Let me find that. It's escaping me for some reason. Let me find the Philistine Philistine cities. So I said Gaza, Gath, Ascalon, Ekron, and Ashdod. Yeah, Ashdod. Yeah, that's the fifth one. So these were the chief Philistine city-states during the historical times. Philistines being the Peleset, and Peleset themselves being recorded to had come from Crete. And not only do we have, I believe, ancient Hebrew records, we also have archaeological evidence which shows that the locally produced Peleset pottery from the middle of the 12th century BC is the exact same as that produced on Cyprus after the fall of Alatia and the emergence of the Greeks on the island of Cyprus at the same time period, around in the decades following the late Bronze Age collapse, around 1150 BC, mid-century, and then the following decades. And the same goes for the Aegean Islands. The pottery, this very same sub-Mycenaean pottery continued to be produced in places such as Rhodes, the island of Rhodes, some coastal parts of mainland Greece, I believe, and so on. So definitely Peleset were from Greece. Teyeker, we do not know where they came from, and Denyen often associated with the Danaeans or the city of Adana, which was believed to had been founded during the same time period in Cilicia, the southern coastal Anatolia. And obviously, there's links to Greek colonization and the establishment of Greek outposts across Pamphylia and Cilicia or Cilicia. I believe, according to the mythological or according to ancient Greek tradition, it was an individual called Mospos who was settling those areas, and many of those emerging cities in Pamphylia, which is southern Anatolia, coastal southern Anatolia, as you can see on the map, right up opposite Cyprus, and Cilicia or Cilicia was to its east. Many of those royal houses or aristocratic families traced their lineage to mythological Mospos. So there's that possible connection with the Greeks there, and those were groups mentioned by the Egyptians, among others. Obviously, we have Weshesh, we have Shekelesh, we have Sherden, as we have mentioned already. We have Teresh, have we have Luca. Have I mentioned? Have I missed some of the sea peoples? You can remind me if I forgot some of the groups. Hekaton says, "I wonder whether the Pist, no, oh, the Peleset can be identified with the Pelasgians." Well, that's another theory that this group could be related to the Pelasgians. We do know that Pelasgians inhabited Crete. They are mentioned in the Odyssey, I believe, as, yes, certainly the Odyssey as one of the tribes or peoples inhabiting the island of Crete, alongside the Achaeans, the Dorians, the Eteocretans, who were autochthonous to the island, and Kydones, also apparently autochthonous to the western part of Crete. So among those, we have Pelasgians listed as well. And just judging by the name similarity, Pelasgians, Palaset, it's possible. Thomas says, if the sea peoples were mostly Greek, then wouldn't the collapse of the palace systems caused a migration? Well, yes, collapse of the palace centers would have caused migration, but the problem is that we do not know the details, and we can just theoretically say, yes, it's possible that they could have caused, but we do not know what actually happened. We know that there was a violent and sudden destruction in a period of a decade or 2 decades, that Pylos was destroyed completely. We do have Linear B records saying talking about an imminent attack from the sea on Pylos, and we have subsequent destruction of much of Mycenae itself, a sack of Mycenae. Obviously, Mycenae survived until the end of the century, but it wasn't the chief Mycenaean settlement following that destruction, because many of the refugees, many of the population moved to Tiryns, which was not destroyed at that time, and it increased in population and became the most important citadel in Argolis in the sub-Mycenaean period. And we also have Luis Aldames in the chat. He says, "Hi all, I missed half of the stream apparently." Well, to be honest, you missed most of the stream because we are at the last segment. But after this segment, we're going to engage with the chat a little bit, so we're not going to end the stream immediately, so it's all good. But yes, let me put that on the screen. These were the segments for everybody that wasn't here from the beginning. So we went through the overview, we went through the background on the Egyptians in the late Bronze Age. We went through the background of the Mycenaeans and their own rise in mainland Greece and then throughout the Aegean region. We had the land of the Tanayu, the first mentioned, and then the subsequent context in which Tanayu was mentioned, how we found geographic locations of the Tanayu, the chief cities being Mycenae, the the port of Nauplia, the island of Kythera, perhaps a stopping point for the Egyptians as they sailed from Crete to Mycenae. They mentioned Thebes, they mentioned Messenia, and then we did not go straight to Aquesh. First, we went through the Mycenaean Egyptian trade, as you can see on the screen right now. We went through these, probably the most important part of the Egyptian Mycenaean relations in the late Bronze Age, commercial relations, because there were not many political or military or any other relations between the two civilizations, mostly trade and commerce. And then we finally went through the Aquesh and their possible or likely, should I say likely connection to the Achaeans and their whereabouts as a part of the Sea Peoples. Jim says, what about Sardis for the origin of the Shardana? Or was the Norregic culture of Sardinia already present? Well, I yesterday or the day before, when did we have the live stream on the identity of the sea people? So we went through all possible theories. The bottom line is that only a couple of only a select few of the sea people groups we can say this was their identity with certainty. I think only the Luca, obviously Lucia, the Karkia or Karkisa, Karia, the Peleset, their place of origin is Crete. We know that. What else? Aquesh, very likely, not 100% certainly because of that controversy with the circumcision, but other than that, very likely associated with the Achaeans. We have Denian. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, generally associated with Greeks or with mm, the region of Greece, but who knows whether or not many of these peoples were Greeks or some tribes or sea peoples that inhabited the general region of the Aegean Sea is not known, but it is believed that the majority of the sea peoples came from some region that is in some way connected to the Aegean, if not Greece itself. Luis Aldame says it's not just possible that Pelasgians are the Peleset, it's logically necessary, more so as we see the Philistines or Peleset almost fully in the Greek cultural sphere. So yes, Luis, I've already mentioned this before you joined. I mentioned the ancient Hebrew records that place the Peleset on the island of Crete as their place of origin. And I did mention the archaeological evidence which confirms not only pottery, I mentioned pottery, but I did not mention the architectural style. Obviously, early Peleset in the Philistia, they built Mycenaean Megaron style buildings in their cities. So that's another feature. They did have Mycenaean architecture, at least early on when they settled before they blended with the local population over the following centuries. But I also did mention pottery, the Palisade pottery, the pottery from Cyprus, and the pottery from the Aegean at the same time period, mid 12th century BC and mid to late 12th century BC, and it's almost exact same pottery. Very different from the Canaanite pottery. Very different. Much more decorated, similar motifs on all of these respective potteries, and very different from the rather plain and basic Canaanite pottery and early Israelite pottery, which was very basic compared to the Greeks. Teresh might be Tyrians. I mean, I wish we had some other type of records where we could like cross-examine some of these names that would help us a lot in determining the exact locations. Luis Adames, I was catching up with something you said where you used the word possible, which I found too shy. In which context? I can't recall in which context I said possible because I said possible a lot of times during the stream. So you would have to remind me. Tyrians. Oh, the you mean Phoenicians from Tyre? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I confused it with the city of Tiryns in Greece. So I would have to rethink what I said when it comes to that. Give me a second. So Tyre was under Egyptian control, especially under Ramses the Great. I find it unlikely that the Sea Peoples would be the Phoenicians because the Sea Peoples originally, as reported by the Egyptians when they destroyed Ugarit and Alasia and the Hittites, they they had a base in the land of Amuru, which is northern part of the Levant to the south of Carchemish, the land of the Amuru. And from the Amuru land, they proceeded southwards and invaded Egypt from there. So I don't think that any of the Phoenicians would be among the sea peoples. Perhaps some individual groups, some opportunists, but as a group, I am not sure about that. Oh, context for possible Peleset Pelasgians. I think it's a fact, as a fact as it gets. You said it's possible. Well, you're right there, but the reason I don't want to go further is because I don't feel like making any like concrete claims like that just in case, you know. It does seem apparent that Pelasgians would be connected to Peleset based on the name alone. There's evidence that Pelasgians did inhabit Crete. They not only inhabited Crete, they inhabited Thessaly, all over the coastal Aegean regions, both sides of the Aegean. They inhabited those regions, but chiefly coastal regions of Greece and Pelasgians, Peleset, very similar. Very similar. I'll leave it at that. Very similar. Levant was under Egypt this time period, I think. You mean the Bronze Age collapse? Uh, Perhaps they had claims in the Levant, but they certainly did not control northern Levant for sure. I believe they exercised hegemony over the southern part of Levant, southern Canaan, the area of Israel, the area of Philistia, the area south to the Phoenicians, Phoenicia. But I don't think that at the time of Ramses III, they exercised control over Byblos and Sidon and other Phoenician cities. Perhaps nominally, I'm not sure, I would have to research that, but they did not appear to control the land of Amuru, which served as a base of the Sea Peoples for their further attack. They did not control Amuru for sure. Why is the knowledge of this era so mysterious? Because there's not enough concrete information and evidence to to tell us the specifics. So unfortunately, we have to make theories and devise possibilities based on what we have, especially when it comes to the sea peoples. Because the Raiders are ashamed of their history. Well, that might be true, who knows, but not the Dorians. Not the Dorians. They were proud to had taken Peloponnese, so not the Dorians. They were not ashamed. Luis Aldama says Pelasgian Peliset and Sardinians Sherden are the two most clear sea peoples identifications. Well, they are not more clear than Luca for the Lucians. I would say Luca is definitely number one. There's zero dispute for Luca. So I would say Luca is number one, the clearest. Number two, probably Karkia, if you consider them to be sea peoples, because they only took part in the Battle of Kadesh, so not really. They shouldn't. Some scholars do not consider them to be among the sea peoples. They count, I believe, the Libyan invasion and their allies as the beginning of the Sea Peoples, and then they count that event, and then the main invasion of Egypt itself. So most of the times Carians are not even counted. So if you want to discount Carians, you still have Luca as the clearest identification, in my opinion. And I think that Peleset is clearer than Sheridan, because for Peleset we have multiple sources. We do not have only one source. So for Peleset we have Egyptian sources, and we have the the Israelite sources, and I believe that we have Assyrian sources also. But let's say the biblical sources are very descriptive of the Peleset, or the Peleshet as they call them, or Pilishtim in some of the versions that they use that term. And they say they came from from Crete. I'm not sure if the Egyptians make any claim on any statements on their origins, but we can cross-examine Peleset with different sources. We do not have that with the Sheridan. So I would say Peleset are a little bit clearer than Sheridan, in my opinion, but Luca is undisputed. Ancient History Gaming says by the year 1200 BC, Egyptian hegemony was weaker than it was at the start of the century. Well, for sure, yeah, yeah, that's facts. If going by name, maybe the Teresh were Tyrsanians. Yes, that's possible. And as I've already mentioned, we have already done an episode on the Sea Peoples. It was the previous episode, so check that one out. But I see by the level of popularity that Sea Peoples get on this channel, we should do another episode on the Sea Peoples. I don't know what exact context. The last episode was the identity of the Sea Peoples, so perhaps we should do wars and battles of the Sea Peoples, and then we can go through the chronology and just focus on perhaps Battle of Kadesh at first, and then Battle of Periri, and then Battle of the Nile Delta, and go through the Sea People's expeditions based on that. and perhaps maybe speculate and theorize about their whereabouts in the Luca, the Alasia, and the war with the Hittites, because we do have Hittite sources from Hattusa, from Karkemish, and from Ugarit, speaking of an invasion of the Hittite territory, invasion of Ugarit, of the Hittite territory, and a naval battle by the Lucian coast, when the I believe ruler of Ugarit says, "All my ships are in the land of Luca, and all my army, or all my soldiers, or my men are in the land of Hattusa, defending Hattusa." So there was a two-front war against the Hittites and allies that caused the downfall of the Hittite Empire. And how can we be sure that the Pelasgians were called like that in the Bronze Age? Isn't Pelasgian a word that appears in classical Greece? Just a doubt. I believe that, yes, you are right, but when you say classical Greece, you probably also include archaic Greece in that as well, because Greek alphabet starts from about 800 BC, which is technically archaic Greece period, end of the Dark Age, beginning of archaic Greece, and between archaic period and the Mycenaean collapse, we have the Dark Ages, and the Dark Ages were famous for being big on oral history and transmission of oral history and events through from generation to generation. So what happened is that events got highly corrupted, a lot of mythology thrown in, and so on and so on. But when it comes to the names of the peoples, I don't think that changed at all, because if you make a comparison between the locations mentioned in the Iliad and the historical Mycenaean era locations in the Linear B records and archaeological evidence, it's an exact match. So I don't think that people would just suddenly forget the name of their own name throughout the centuries just because they don't have a writing system. Because Pelasgians still existed in the archaic period. By the time we have the development of the Greek alphabet, some of the Pelasgians still exist, and I believe the island of Lemnos or Lesbos, I think Lemnos, Pelasgians still exist on the island. I believe small pockets of the Pelasgians existed either on in northern Aegean somewhere. I would have to do a research, but they were not exterminated by 800 BC. At least there were mentions of some Pelasgian groups that recently or in the recent centuries adopted the Hellenic identity and became Ionians. I remember those texts. Luis Adames says Sardinians traded with Egypt copper and Iberia tin, and had those awesome horned helmets documented in many figurines. They're extremely clear. I don't disagree with you on Sheridan and Sardinia. I'm just saying that if you want to create levels of certainty, I think Weshesh would be the lowest, the least amount of certainty, and Luca would be number one, just because of the abundance of different sources that mention them and their whereabouts. We have Luca mentioned by pretty much every contemporary civilization, and we have Karkia mentioned by the Hittites and by the Egyptians, and we have Peleset mentioned by the Egyptians and by the Israelites, and the fact that the Peleset had their own history and their own very very much recorded history in the subsequent period where we have abundance of contemporary sources in the historical time. I mean, when I say historical times, I really mean the period after the Greek Bronze Age. So Iron Age and forward. I'm poking fun to the idea that phonology can securely identify a particular population in any inscription. Clearly, multiple lines of evidence are needed. I agree. I mean, it's if let's pull a list of the sea peoples. Let's see. Give me 1 second, and I will find the list, and we can create a rate ranking of which are the most certain and which are the least certain when it comes to the sea peoples. So give me 1 second. I will call it SP for sea peoples. All right, we have the list right here. For some reason it's huge, so I have to trim it down to a normal size. But this you should be able to see on the screen. List of recorded sea people. So tell me which ones are the least likely to be identified, which are the most obscure. I would say Washesh are the most obscure. Oh, Rithimna is in the chat. Well, welcome to the live episode. I think this is the first time you are on live stream. If I am I right? We have a person from Greece here, a frequent, an esteemed member of this WanaxTV community. Luis Aldames, I concur. Washesh are the most obscure ones, although I think they were the Ausonis of South Italy, archaeologically documented to have raided Greece. Who knows? I mean, the problem is that the name Washesh is so vague, and it's written in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, so we do not know if it's even pronounced Washesh or if it sounds anything like Washesh. It could sound like something different. So that's a problem with the Washish, I think, and they're only known for, or actually, the only thing that they are mentioned that's added to their name is of the sea. So it's Washish of the sea, I believe. That's the only marking that the Egyptians give them. Were there trading records around the time? Seems like the Mycenaean names would be well known. Well, in some of the inscriptions, they do list items that were important from somewhere. I mean, I'm speaking in general, but usually that's not very elaborate. Rhythmna says, first time, yes, woke up really early today. Well, welcome to the show. I mean, it's difficult to imagine somebody from Greece being online. I think right now, what is it, 6 a.m., 6:15 a.m. in Greece. So that's very impressive. That I think it's 7 hours difference from the Eastern time right here. Here it's 11:15 p.m. So Luis Aldames, I assume you were talking about the Washish. Arzawans, Assuans could also match the phonetics. Yes, you're right. You're right. Could be Washish is very vague, very vague. So whatever they called themselves, they didn't call themselves the Washish. That's for sure. I think there was an a DNA study on Philistine burials and found some evidence for migration from the Aegean, and it seems consistent in what is being said. Yes, you're right. I think they did DNA testing from several different periods when it comes to the Philistine burials, and those burials that that happened in the time period that we're talking about, the middle to late 12th century BC, and perhaps from the 11th century, they are very close to the Aegean DNA samples, and those from the later centuries, I believe 9th to 8th century BC, they are not as close because it is assumed that by that time they really blended and intermixed with the local population, and then the genes of the Aegean genes were minimized throughout the centuries. 6:15 a.m. exactly, Rithimna says. Yeah, that's impressive. I mean, thank you for being here. Josh Gardner says, is it possibly a derogatory term, Weshesh? I don't think it's a derogatory term. I think it's just that it's probably not even Washish. I think whatever the Egyptians written, they probably did not mean to pronounce it Washish anyway. They just wrote something in the hieroglyphs that we today somehow pronounce as Washish. Washish doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense. David Roll gives two possible locations for the Washish. One is Iassos, okay, south of Miletus, okay, that's a smaller settlement, and also Assuwa, a region south of the Troad. So we have a few problems with it, with those locations because Owassos is not confirmed to be a version of Iassos. I think that's a reconstructed word. So we do not have any evidence that Iassos is Owassos. I think that's just a reconstruction. And besides that, Iassos is a very small settlement. Even in Bronze Age, it was not very relevant. And in classical times, it was not relevant. I mean, not very relevant, not compared to Miletus, not compared to the vast majority of the Ionian city-states, or not compared to the city-states of the Dorian Dodecapolis, for that matter. So I find it very unlikely that such a minor settlement would suddenly produce a group of the Sea Peoples. That's If anything, Iasus was a satellite town of a bigger settlement such as Miletus in the Bronze Age, in the late Bronze Age. So, and Assuwa, the region south of the Troad. So another problem with that is that Assuwa is also not confirmed to be a region south of the Troad because Assuwa League consisted of, I believe, 22 cities and tiny states, and Troy was one of them. So Troy was a part of Assuwa. So Assuwa, which means Asia, pretty much. It's where Asia comes from. And Luis Aldames is right. The problem is that Assuwa did not exist anymore in those dates. It had been replaced by Arzawa. And even for that, it's a vague evidence. Assuwa is, I believe, roughly the region of Asia Minor, or at least Western Asia Minor, at least according to the Greeks originally. And Assuwa is definitely nowhere stated to have been a region south of Troad. That's not what Assuwa is. But connection with Arzawa is possible, but then once again, the problem is that the Hittite records are vague when it comes to these very early sources too, because Asua seems to be a coastal region because based on the correspondence between the king of Ahiau and the king of the Hittites, Ahiawan king says, the king of Asua in the past gave my ancestors some of the islands, so you can't claim those islands because you conquered Arzawa, paraphrasing. So so it's hard to pinpoint Asua. We can pinpoint Arzawa. It's the territory with the capital city of Ephesus or Apasa and goes further inland, but it's more difficult to pinpoint Asua. But I assume Asua is more broad than Arzawa. Why did the Egyptians refer to the Greeks as Tanayu? Why switch to Ekwesh afterwards? Seems strange. Well, that's kind of true that it's strange. Why did they use Tanayu as originally? It is unlikely that they pronounce it Tanayu. It's just, that the Greeks are, excuse me, the Egyptians, they don't have vowels. And we have a super chat from, let me pronounce this correctly.
Hekatonikosachoron.
So we have a super chat from Hackathon. And excuse me, it's 11:20 here. I don't want to pronounce that incorrectly. So, well, sorry for the interruption. Yeah, no, no worries, no worries. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. And usually when people do super chat, they put some question or some comment, but I'm engaging with everybody. So thank you very much, appreciate it. And make sure to come back tomorrow. We're gonna have another stream tomorrow at I will try to do it a little bit earlier so that people from Europe can more easily hop on the stream. I have some things scheduled for the morning, so I will try to be here between 12 p.m., between noon and 4 p.m. Let's say expect a stream around that time. And funny thing is that I have not decided on the topic. So if you guys have any suggestions for the topic for tomorrow, maybe we can do that. Josh says, 1x, you are growing your community. Yes, I'm glad to see that actually. That's true, and I know it's difficult for people to be online here at this late hour because our audience is mixed. I think half of it's the US and half of it's Europe. So the ideal time to go live is maybe like 2 p.m. or something, but it's difficult for me because of my own schedule beyond the channel and so on and so on. So it's not easy for me to pull that off. But on Sunday, it's easier than usual. So we're gonna do stream tomorrow, and we have not decided on the topic yet. So make sure to give out some suggestions, and let's see. Real Uvain says, or Uvane, or you tell me if I pronounced it right. The topic is the Amazons. Luis Aldamis says Hecate tonic is probably quite powerful. Oh, okay, okay. Uh, the Amazons as a possible topic. I mean, maybe we could do that. I would have to do a little bit of research because off top of my head, I could go with the Amazons from Greek mythology as they relate to the myths of Heracles, to the myths of Priam and the Phrygians, the Trojan-Phrygian war against the Amazons, and the Trojan War. Those are the three points, three talking points that I know off top of my head. I would have to research the Amazons further, and I'm not sure if I have enough time to do that tomorrow. But I will put it on the list for a future episode. Maybe we end up with the Amazons. Who knows? But perhaps something where I already have more either more research done or more general knowledge about. We'll see. Nicolaus says, it seems based on so many comments that you could do an entire presentation solely on the Pelasgians/Pelaset. The problem with that is there's a million references to the Pelasgians in Greek mythology and in the ancient Greek sources. So I would have to do a super heavy research on the Pelasgians because it's a great topic and I wouldn't want to do like incomplete job when it comes to the Pelasgians. So that's why I'm reluctant to do Pelasgians. Topic: locations depicted in Xena or Hercules TV show. Oh, well. That's more challenging than the Amazons. I'll just go with the Amazons. Hackathon, if you have some idea, some suggestion, give it out. I was thinking of I'm not sure. Maybe should we do something that's not Bronze Age? Should we do classical Greece? Should we do Hellenistic Greece? Should we do a non-Greek kingdom? Phrygians? What should we do? One of ideas that I had for lesser known people were the Halizones from the Trojan War. I was thinking about Halizones, but I don't think that I will do them tomorrow. And we also have single combat, which I'm not going to do tomorrow because I still need some time to do the research. So we'll see. We'll see what the topic is going to be. I guess I have limited amount of time to decide that, but Carl says anything with Phrygians is cool. Yes, I agree. I agree. Phrygians are a great topic. I did a series on the Phrygians in the past. One of the early video, like years ago, one of the early videos, early series that I did on the channel was the Phrygians. Perhaps we could redo the Phrygians. Josh says, are there children's toys from this era found in excavations? I believe there are those figurines, and I'm not well, it's a good question. It's a good question. Hectation says, I'm all for the Bronze Age, especially the Minoans. Should we do Minoan Egyptian relations tomorrow? Or no? Should we do something with the Minoans? Should we do Minoan Navy? Should we do Minoan ships? Perhaps we could do that. Uh, we did the Minoan civilization in general like a month ago, but Minoans are a permanent topic on this channel, just like the Mycenaeans. So we could do Minoan Egyptian trade, Minoan Egyptian relations in the Bronze Age. We could do that. We could do Minoan warfare. We could do Minoan navy. Nicolas says yes, yes, definitely. What do you mean? Like what? Minoan Navy, Minoan and Egypt, Minoans and Egypt, or Minoan warfare? What should we do? Yes, we can do Egyptian finds at Akrotiri on Thera and the dating of the Minoan eruption. Yes, talk about that fresco in Akrotiri where you can see ships. Actually, I did. I believe I already did extensive research on the Minoan ships. They had like 8 types of ships. On in my preparation for one of the videos last year, I believe it was Minoan warfare, and the navy was very important to the Minoan. So I was doing a huge research on the Minoan ships, and they produced about 8 types of ships. So I could do Minoan navy tomorrow, Minoan ships, or Minoan Egyptian relations. What do you want? Nicolaus says Minoan Egyptian relations. Real says Minoan gods. Josh says Minoan navy. Okay, is it possible to create a pool here? Let's see. Let's see. Is that possible? Okay. I'm starting a pool, so let's see. Topic for tomorrow. What do we have as suggestions? Let's see. We have Minoan Egyptian relations. What else? We had at least 3 suggestions here. Let me find that. Minoan and Egypt, Minoan Navy, Minoan gods. Okay, okay, Minoan gods. All right, let's go. Let's see. Whatever is decided in this poll, we're gonna go with it. Tomorrow afternoon, Eastern Time. All right, so for now we have Minoan Egyptian relations leading the poll. We have Minoan gods the second place, or it's changing a little bit. We have 0 votes for Minoan warfare. Interesting. Second place is Minoan gods. It's going to come down to either Minoan Egyptian relations or Minoan gods, but I'm going to leave this poll on for now. I can't end the stream. We are what? We are 1 hour and 50 minutes in, almost 2 hours. So my original plan was to conclude this stream right now, but I can't because we have a poll. So let's see what happens here. Minoans, Carl says Minoans and Egypt sounds cool. I know there's hints of Minoan trade in the Nile Delta during the Hyksos time. Luis Aldama says Minoan Navy sounds awesome. Jim says the mining. That would be interesting. Did the Minoans trade with Britain? I don't think they traded with Britain directly, but who know, you know how indirectly some items can finish at a place where you've never heard about when you which you've never heard of. So it's possible that Minoan items would be far away from the known world as it was known to them. Hectation says unrelated in the future can do Minion pottery and or commoners or something unrelated to the Minoans. Yes, we can. We can do Minion ware for sure. That's an interesting topic. And I would like to do those earlier topics. I like to change it. We don't have to do similar topics every time. We could switch it up a little bit. Minion could be good. We could we could do Orchomenus, Boeotian Orchomenus, maybe add some minions from Greek mythology, some stories of the mythological records on the minions. We could do an episode on the minions in general. We could start with the pottery. Minion pottery is only called minion because there's significant amount of pottery found in Boeotia and in Orchomenus, but whether or not it historically belonged to the tribe of Minions is, I believe it's unlikely, but we could do an episode on that for sure. Luis Aldama says, tomorrow you don't rest much. Sunday is my resting day, so I have something scheduled for Sunday morning. And after that, I will be back working on this on the live stream. And once I get the preparation done, which it's gonna take me like 2 hours, I will go live. And when I finish that, then I will continue my work on the Etruscan civilization, and I also work on a scenario simultaneously for a project for another channel, a big channel. So I can't really reveal too much on that, but yeah, there's a big project in the works also. There will be some big stuff coming. So seems like little recorded interactions with the Eastern. Well, I can't see the whole chat because of this pool. What are the results? So Egyptian Minoan relations are number one. Minoan gods are number two. Minoan navy is number three, and Minoan warfare is number four. But we're only 4 minutes in, so I'm going to let the poll run a little bit longer, just so that we have a representative vote. I'm not going to close the poll immediately, but it looks like Minoan Egyptian relations is what's going to happen tomorrow. Luis Aldame's 8 types of ships sound very interesting. I believe it was possibly even more because some of the types are really modifications of other types, so it could be more than 8 types of ships. And also when it comes to the Minoans, they had those regular galleys, they had the trade ships, and some of those ships could be like multi-use. Those Bronze Age galleys could be used, especially those smaller ones, faster ones, could be used for warfare and for trade. And also there were Minoans had several types of ceremonial ships, which is very interesting. So that's pretty cool too. At some point in time, we'll definitely do Minoan ships. They had highly decorated ceremonial ships, which were used to transport aristocracy. Very, very cool stuff. Hectation, I was looking at linear A tablets with linear B values, and there is no obvious mention of Kaptara, Kaftor, or Keftiu. So if you're looking for the Minoan, I haven't done that, so I can't say, but I would not be looking for Kaptara or Keftiu or Kaftor. I would look for uh, Crete. If you go Crete or Crete or Creta, that's what I would be looking for because that would be the closest to to the term that the Minoans used for themselves, because Mycenaeans are the closest to the Minoans, and they had the most interaction with the Minoans, and they would have used the closest terminology to what the Minoans used. So if they say Creta or Crete or Creti, that's probably one of the terms that the Minoans used for themselves. So I would look for that. So Minoan Egyptian relations democracy has spoken in Onex TV channel. Well, Onex doesn't really mirror some democracy by its title, and the era that we're dealing with is not really a democratic era. But I agree. I guess democracy is what it is. So we'll go with the Minoan Egyptian relations. Let me see. How many votes do we have? We are at 42% for Minoan Egyptian relations. So, Luis Aldames, I envy your energy, WanaxTV. Well, one of my plans was to start bringing guests to the channel in these live episodes. What do you think of that? Would you like to see History with Sai as a guest here? Yes, there are Minoan style frescoes at Avaris during or after the Hyksos period. There are also some Minoan frescoes in the Levant. Hectation says, yes, I agree. I think there's one very famous Minoan fresco from Avaris. It's either done by the hired Minoan artisans or created by the Minoans and then given to the ruling dynasty in Avaris. But yes, it's a Minoan fresco, and you can even see the Egyptian frescoes where they depict the Minoans. They look so much like they have much more decorations on their clothes than the Egyptians, even in the Egyptian frescoes. So Minoans were really considered very likely considered very luxurious by the Egyptians, very exotic possibly, but they were considered to be very wealthy. That's for sure. Luis Aldame says, but Ker is not linear A slash B phonology, maybe careta. I agree with you, Luis. Uh, I just pronounced it. That's how it would have been pronounced. But if we're going by the linear A slash linear B, we have to we have to go a little bit differently, obviously. So careta kind of makes sense. I would have to I haven't done my research when it comes to the linear B records. I know Knossos is Konoso, so Konoso is Knossos. I would have to double check Crete. Let me see. The real Juven says yes. Sai is dope. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's sleeping at the moment or he's working on some of his projects. I can't reveal his projects, but he's got something very interesting coming up. So says Luis Aldami says Sai is fine, but I was watching him yesterday on Pete Kelly's channel. Well, I started. I still haven't watched it because it's 3.5 hours that they did, and I wanted to leave my comment and everything, but I was working at the time. I believe it was around noon that the live stream took place. So I started it, and I actually talked with Sai afterwards. Um, so I know what he's planning. You should definitely keep an eye on and on his channel. But it's funny that I say that because probably most of the people on my channel came to me from History with Sai. So obviously we're gonna keep an eye on History with Sai's channel. But yeah, I mean today's topic, Egyptians. There's no better source of information on YouTube than History with Sai if you're interested in ancient Egypt. He does dynasty by dynasty series. I watched every one of those episodes throughout the last like 2 or 3 years. I don't even remember for how long he's been running the series, and it's great. It's great. You should check that for sure. Wild Woody NL says Minoan ships were cool. Love how their public transport ships acted like buses with people sitting in rows. Well, I don't think that was exactly public transportation, likely a highly exclusive transportation, but yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, they were depicted as sitting very still and proud in those frescoes with those little caps, Minoan caps. Minoans and saffron. This is a great topic because I believe the earliest records of saffron was comes from the Minoans, and typically saffron is associated with the Persians, with Iran, the region of Iran, and the Persians. But I believe it's actually the Minoans that practice saffron that grew saffron the earliest, if I believe, and you can see saffron in Minoan frescoes as well. So saffron trade was very lucrative for the Minoans. Hectation says would be keta or kereta, but most commonly used vowels were a, I, U, and EO were not used nearly as much. Ethio-Cretan inscriptions much later seem to have a vocalic R, which complicates things. Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would complicate things for sure. I would love to see those Ethio-Cretan inscriptions. You're probably referring to classical era and Hellenistic era Ethio-Cretan inscriptions. I'm not sure if they have a I'm not sure if they have translated those. I do remember the instance of a dual script because it was at some point they were writing that on the Greek alphabet, the Ethio-Cretan inscriptions, and I do remember the dual inscription on the Greek alphabet. One is Greek and one is Ethio-Cretan. But from what I remember reading, they lost that during World War II. They lost that somewhere and they haven't found it. But correct me if there are any other finds that I am not aware of. Josh Gardner, is it okay to say Minoan women lived a high standard of living? I would say so. Yeah, I would say yes. And that's something that they have in common with the Etruscan women, which you will find out in the Etruscan documentary. We will touch on that subject as well. But I think judging by the frescoes and everything that we can see visually from the Minoan civilization, women occupied a very important and religious place in the society. Luis Aldamis KR is not something that happens in Basque, for example. A vowel should be in between. I'm not an expert on Basque or Basque language. Uh, I do know that it is considered to be Paleo-European, which is you know correct. But other than that, well, the thing is that it's very difficult to create a map, like to map out or pinpoint the relations and connections between what would be different Paleo-European languages, whether or not there existed several different families of Paleo-European languages, not necessarily connected to each other at all, or they were all part of the same source. We don't know that, so we have another issue there. Luis Adames, yes, that's true. I myself probably found WanaxTV from. I can't see anything because of this poll that I have. I should close it. What's the score? Yeah, so, well, yes. Minoan Egyptian relations won. So we're closing the poll and we're doing Minoan Egyptian relations tomorrow afternoon. That's it. Congrats for everybody who participated. We're going to do Minoan Egyptian relations tomorrow. And so now I can finally see what Luis Aldames says. He says, yes, that's true. I myself probably found WanaxTV many years ago from History with Sai. Extremely good channel. Yes, that's what I'm saying. A lot of people, because many of you don't remember that History with Sai did a collaboration video with me early on, uh, early during early One TV period on his channel about the first Mycenaean War or Mycenaean Wars, and um, and many of the people from his channel came to my channel. At least many of the people on WanaxTV channel currently came from History with Sai because I only had a handful of subscribers at the time, maybe 2,000, 3,000 subscribers. He really offered to do a collaboration with me when I had zero subscribers before I launched the channel. I remember he told me I sent him a sample of a video, some introduction that I created, and he was like, "Oh man, this is very good. You should definitely start a channel. I'll help you out. We can collaborate." And I was like, "Wow, yeah, sure, I should do that." So that's basically how everything started. So yeah, thank History with Sai for that. Josh Gardner says no one talks about how the ancients had hot running water, especially the palaces. Real Yuan says, isn't Basque a bit similar to Hebrew? Hectation says, yes, there is a bilingual, very short inscription from Prisos. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Or Dreros or something like that. It's about milk, from what I remember. Don't quote me on that. So, if do you know that that inscription exists? If so, I'm going to try to find it. To be honest, because I thought that the only inscription that existed I forgot what the inscription was about, but I read that they lost it during World War II. But that's probably different in inscription. It's very short, so it's probably not going to help us much. But if we could get a grasp of a Minoan or Ethio-Cretan words, their terminology, that would be interesting, you know. All right, so we have arrived to 2 hours and 10 minutes mark. I guess it's time for us to wrap it up. It's almost midnight here, 11:54 p.m. Josh Gardner says, I'm surprised Sai doesn't do touring lectures. So stay tuned when it comes to history with Saya. I'll just say that stay tuned and see what happens. He's cooking. He's cooking something. Luis Aldama says, oh, referring to Semitic, to Hebrew. Not at all. Basque is not in any way related to Semitic languages, which include Hebrew. Yeah, so Hebrew is a Semitic language. It's related, perhaps more or less closer or more distantly related to different other Semitic languages, such as Aramaic. I believe even Akkadian is a Semitic language. Phoenician language, definitely Semitic, and Hebrew was kind of close to Phoenician language from what I remember. Also, Arabic languages or Arabic is also a Semitic language, so Hebrew is related to Arabic as well. They are the same family of languages. And Luis Aldama says, good night, WanaxTV, and all the merry company. Thank you very much. Stay tuned to WanaxTV for more topics and information. Definitely. So we'll be back with the Minons tomorrow. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for participating in this poll that we did. It was pretty fun in the end. And this is perhaps something that we could adopt and do for every live episode. We could finish the topic and then stay for a half an hour or so and just chat and see what are we gonna do next. Nicolaus says, good night, Wanex. Thank you very much. Oh, good night, King Wanex. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. Take care.